Mountain, Island, Lightning Bolt, Spell Pierce, Switchblade, Stab Wound, Red Mage, Blue Mage.
All right. Buckle up. Sit back. Don't relax. I'm taking over the show.
What?
Yes, that's right. Today is a special episode where it's all about me.
Happy birthday.
Every episode of Red Mage, Blue Mage is on my birthday. It's just today is a special birthday for me. Because I decided randomly that today was my special birthday day for Red Mage, Blue Mage.
I was going to say, real quick interlude here. That's a great trait for a goblin PC character. They think every day is their birthday.
Yes.
It's my birthday!
Exactly. That's me. Krark here, ready to take you on a wild and amazing ride.
All right.
Hopefully that is interesting. Hopefully that is correct. Hopefully coherent. So,
what are we talking about?
We are talking about print production, specifically about how cards get made. So, as Amber, not Krark, I have a job in which I am basically a content production manager / graphic design manager / instructional design manager. I'm lots of things, but primarily my work involves print production, where I am and my team are making manuals and labels and cards for product. And so a lot of my job is, my entire job, it basically goes through the whole R&D process, because I have to know the product in order to make the content, in order to then put it into a format that which can be printed. And then I also talk to vendors and the printing companies to make sure our files are set up right and that things look good when they are printed. So that's what we're talking about today, because Magic primarily has always been a physical format. Now we're in the digital world, Magic Online, now Arena, and that stuff, but the physicalness still exists. And not too long ago, I want to say War of the Spark, people were complaining about card quality.
Well, I was going to say, if I can jump in with my... this is basically all I know about this whole issue of card quality. Card stock has gotten a lot worse, just from my understanding, and also just looking at the cards. And the print production has declined over the years. And the only extra thing on top of that, the foiling process. People hate foils.
And there's
because they're Pringles.
Yeah, I mean, I had a Aurelia who you could only get in foil at the time. I don't even know if they do a non-foil print of her, but she just like I can hold my commander deck up and you can point out where Aurelia is at, because it's just it has curved and bent so much. So Kenny, feel free to interrupt me as I go to ask questions, but I'm going to start from like the very beginning. So before time,
there was the singularity.
Before tree was turned into pulp. No, it's in the process of when you know you're going to be making a physical product. Before you spend time making that physical product, you need to research and find out who your vendors are going to be, your suppliers are going to be, because, and I've struggled with this in my R&D life, where I'm told we want to do X, and I'm like, okay, that's really cool, but then when they finally tell me who the vendor is, I've made all of my stuff thinking X, but the vendor goes, no, we can't do X, we have to do Y, so redo everything that you've set up file-wise, because it won't work. So when you go to know, like, hey, I want to make a card or get prints made or even like enamel pins or any of that, you should spend time finding out who your vendor will be to make your product, because that vendor will have their own specific requirements about how the graphic designer should be setting things up, how things will need to be delivered to them, their timelines, what they need to get stuff done in, yada, yada, yada. Plus, from a business perspective, costs, materials, all that stuff. It's always been fascinating to me how things get made and like the process of development, and that how much of a business is in-house versus using supply chains. And that is a problem too. It's like when you have a vendor that you're like, I want to use this printing company, but they don't make the paper. They don't make the ink. They are just the place that has the machines that takes the paper, takes the ink, and they have their own supply chain, bringing in paper, bringing in ink, and all of that. So it's like, yeah, I'm reaching out to a vendor to talk with, but I need to know their supply chain too, because if the paper vendor is experiencing X, or they don't have very good timelines, or you find out that you don't like how they do things, but you've signed up with the print vendor, then you're kind of screwed. You can negotiate with, if you're a big enough company, you can negotiate with that print vendor to change their own suppliers and that kind of stuff, and come to those agreements. But this is such a big deal because as we've experienced in Magic, whatever print vendor they were using, their paper supply chain must have changed. Right? Now, why did that change? Was there and it could be so many different things, right? It could be if you're getting stuff printed in China, Chinese New Year in February, usually they are like, everything shuts down.
They're shut down. Yeah.
And if you're trying to rush demand something, oh, well, we'll go to Vietnam instead, or we'll go to Thailand, or whoever else that can get us paper, right? And I speak from experience because this has happened. Or a contract lapsed, right? And they're like, well, we're going to be competitive. This print house, we decided that we're going to print our own competitive Magic the Gathering card game, or we've decided to sign up with somebody else. And that's scary for you because now you don't want to be paying your competitor. You don't want to be helping your competitor out by financially giving them money. And so then you have to pull out, and then you do a scramble trying to find. That's sometimes what happens as well.
I was going to say, jumping back for just a second, there's an interesting thing going on in these setups where when you're dealing with vendors who have their own vendors, it's like, okay, I like and trust this vendor, but they are dealing with some other vendor, and that vendor has some other vendors, and it's like, as soon as you get a couple degrees of separation, you as a corporate entity no longer have any reason to trust these other people downstream. Right.
A lot of the times it is 2 to 5 degrees of separation. And so quality control, and you're relying on the company that you contracted to maintain standards. But also sometimes what the problem is capacity. A vendor that they've established, a print vendor who's established a relationship with a paper vendor might be good, and they might be solid, and they might have a good working understanding with each other, and the quality is on lock and everything, but that print vendor cannot meet the demands of the new contracted work that's coming from, let's say, Wizards of the Coast, right? Like, we need to print X million cards in X time, and then this print vendor's like, that's just not feasible. We can't do that. And sometimes what happens is they will get a loan from a company, and then they can potentially grow their capability. But that's a risk. Again, it's like, do we do that? Because how do we know it will be, maintained, sustainable over time? Will we even make our money back? So then that puts the print vendor in a situation where they need to find another vendor who can meet the demand for production, and then maybe quality shifts, slides, and it's usually at that point in time out of unless you have a dedicated person, which most companies do, a dedicated person who spends all the time quality controlling and checking in and managing how the vendors are doing stuff, right? So we haven't even made art yet, right? Like this is a vendor purely research phase looking for who can take care of our needs, essentially. Let's make a fake company. So we can not talk about Wizards of the Coast. Let's make our own card game company that we're going to do.
Okay. Gameslappers.
Okay, so we're Gameslappers Incorporated, and we want to slap some games on you. Slap my game up. So we're looking and we're deciding, okay, hey, this is where we're going to do our printing at. We're going to go to, let's make a company up for a print company. Prints are us.
Okay.
Okay, so Gameslappers has said, okay, prints are us. We really like the quality of your paper. We really like the vendor that you're using. Okay, the cost is great, and we want to enter business with you. Okay, cool. Got it. Now it's time for choosing your stock, choosing your inks, choosing that kind of stuff. And cardstock is a fun... The world of paper is wide and beautiful. Let me just say that. There is so much out there. I remember one time I went to go to a print vendor and I just got to like touch their samples and it was like heaven. It's the same how I feel with yarn too.
Just a tactile.
Yeah, and like to go through their like sample room, because they usually have a area where, you know, they talk to the customers and stuff, and then they get to bring out like books of like pages of cardstock they use and what it looks like and what's printed on and that kind of stuff. I just want to say to listeners right now, I don't have in-depth knowledge of paper and print production. That's not my job. My job is making sure the files are set up right for the print vendor, and then only do I listen to them to give me input on what is best. And then I work with our purchasing department on picking that kind of stuff out, like what kind of paper should we use and that kind of stuff. And there's costs associated with everything. But yeah, so you get to go in and again, it's one of those things with paper vendors and where it's like what kind of pulp you use in trees, how it's being processed, what kind of pound do you want, the weight, the thicknesses, you know, recycled, how are you going to do this? And all of that,
a lot of variables.
All of it affects your print. Then of course, the actual ink, a lot of times now they're moving to soy-based inks. And you know, what that looks on certain stock. And then of course your coating, what kind of coatings do you want? Because usually it goes, pick your cardstock, and these are printed on giant sheets of paper. And you pick your cardstock, you have these giant sheets of paper, then you print your ink on that, and depending on all sorts of things I don't really want to get into, what it looks like when it prints out on the paper, and then you have usually a finishing, and then you also could potentially have foiling, other special processes. Foiling is a major one in the trading card game world, getting foil prints, and then also like things like embossing, which was really cool. You won't see that in Magic, but that kind of stuff, like letterpress, all of it is stuff that you can add on top of stuff, and each of those things can change how a card looks, how a card feels, and if it curls or not. So there we are. So now you've got your paper picked out, your inks are picked out, and how you're going to treat your cards are picked out. So then as an artist, what you end up doing in your files is creating separations, because color is printed in layers. I'm doing a lot of motions that no one can see except Santa Kenny, and I describe for the viewer what I am doing. listener.
So you're kind of doing it. You look like a referee in like an NFL, and it's like you're saying like the play that call has been declined. That penalty has been declined. Is the motion that
but
Amber's
that's the
making right now.
layers that I'm spreading
So
out.
yeah, sweeping out layers of color on paper.
Have I lost you yet, Kenny?
No, I'm still here. In my head, So this is the burning question in the back of my head, and you don't have to answer this right now because I feel like you're building up. How does this all add up to shitty printed Magic cards?
What I'm getting at right now, there's much like
There's
the
a lot.
layers of ink that you lay down on top of cardstock to make a beautiful thing. Each layer has potential for something to go wrong if you are not taking care of it each step of the way.
An incredible bridge and an incredible metaphor.
Thank
Mwah.
you.
Delicious.
Thank you. Croc is very good at times.
Who has two thumbs and is great at presentations? Well, not me. I don't have thumbs.
Exactly. Okay, so going back to the printing process itself. So big sheet of paper. Now I'm at my point where I, the graphic designer, am setting up my files to be printed. So ink is laid down one at a time to create a buildup of color, right? It's not all just mixed and printed at once. It's usually like, oh, I'm going to do 50% cyan. Okay, now you do 60% magenta. Okay, now you do yellow, this. And sometimes you have special colors, right? Like Pantones. So 4-color process is the typical. So that's cyan, magenta, blue, and black. And it is printed in layers. And so on the digital side, when a art is sent to the printer, they make plates for each color, right? And it is, again, if this is interesting to you, there's videos out there. Please go to YouTube and watch. It's really cool. It's really fancy. Just look up CMYK printing process or just print process on YouTube, whatever. Find it. Just use the Google. But basically,
I'm just saying, if I were wanting to look for that, I don't even know what I would search
just
for.
Print process, printing process, CMYK plates, how that happens, and usually, it's 4-color. That has a cost to it. It's usually cheaper to do 4-color because you're just using 4 inks, 4 plates, 4 separations. But if you want to add special color, that is another plate. So like a Pantone that's specific, like if Magic the Gathering had a specific Pantone color they use for Jace Balerian Blue, and it's a Pantone, that's another plate. If they want to do some sort of coating or any sort of foiling, that is another, like, pass through the machines, right? So every time you add to it, it adds cost. Also, you're adding ink to paper, which ink is wet and paper is porous. So I'm answering your question now, Kenny, is when you have bad cardstock and a lot of ink and a coating that will shrink up and pull, you're basically creating a scenario where your paper is absorbing liquid and also having a glue-like substance that will pull at the fibers. And if your cardstock is not well made or well done or is super porous or thinner paper, put it with water. At least I'm not printing on like, imagine trying to print on toilet paper, right? It would just like dissolve. So that's what you're getting at. Why cardstock will curl and bend or take on humidity, right? That's why people store their magic cards in humidity controlled areas in their house. Like all of our stuff is in boxes, it's in a cabinet, it's got mothball stuff in it so that it keeps the liquid from entering our cardstock. So that's why it happens. So if you start base wise with a shitty cardstock, anything you add to it, it's gonna just fuck it up over time. That makes sense?
Yes, it does make sense.
Any questions so far, dear Kenny?
I'm thinking. I think that is useful to know, like, why does foil curl? So basically you're just saying the foiling process, it's going to naturally tend to want to curl up paper.
Yes.
Because the paper is absorbing it. The ink or whatever process you're laying on there will, after it dries, will contract. That pulls up the edges. So you get some curling. And basically, if you have good foils that don't curl, it just means you have better quality paper at the beginning.
Yes.
It's not necessarily about the foiling process itself.
No. I mean, it's like I said, like my example of printing on toilet paper. Like you could try to print on anything, but something so delicate is going to get ripped to shreds. And if it is very porous, will absorb a lot of liquid and end up plumping up and contracting or dissolving, you know?
Okay, so I do have a follow-up question here.
Yes.
Because I understand, like, if I have, the thicker my cardstock is, the more robust it's going to be.
Oh, yes.
Is there anything else about, like, paper quality besides just the thickness of the thing?
So, again, I'm not an expert at paper and the actual print process. What I know is basically from college and learning that, and then also just working with print vendors over time. And so for me, I don't feel like I can speak really deeply about what it is about paper and all that stuff and how paper is actually made. I mean, let's just take a stab at it though from my basic knowledge, right? So there's the thickness of paper, right? The weight, which refers to how much if somebody's listening to this and they knows and I'm saying this completely wrong, you can call me out. I don't care. It's fine. Please correct me because I do want to know. But I'm pretty sure when you see things like 8-pound paper, 50-pound paper, it's referring to like the weight per so much square inches or square centimeters that is pressed on a paper to make it
basically
thin or thicker. So if it's a 50-pound paper, it's probably not going to be very thin, but an 80-pound paper like your printer paper is going to be much thinner.
But it'll also be denser? Is that fair to say?
It depends on the pulp mixture. So
Gotcha. So that's
another thing too. So I think there's also a term called grainage. I could be completely wrong, but I think it has everything to do with the amount of pulp or thickness of pulp. I feel like I'm saying shit and it's wrong. I'm probably completely wrong.
Well, I think you're still answering my question, which basically came down to, is thickness of the paper the only variable? And it sounds like no, not at all.
Yes. So thickness of paper is specified by its weight in grams per square meter. So photocopier paper is around 80 grams. A 100 good quality letterhead is about 120, and business cards are about 350, and flyers the same. So there is a lot. Again, it's a very interesting topic. I wish I had spent more time researching it before sitting down, but I wasn't going to get into the nitty gritty of it.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But
you answered my question.
Okay, so yeah, so the thickness of paper is important. What the contents of it is made up of. Like if you're using recycled paper, even the color of paper, they bleach pulp. They make things white, and that will also affect, if you want a really bright, crisp print, you're going to want as bright white paper as possible. Whereas you wouldn't want to do like a matte, like think about printing on actual cardboard, right? And it's a lot of times
it would be just muddied and dulled.
And a lot of the times when you see cartons, and here's my knowledge, a flexo is a carton, and you can sometimes print directly onto cardboard because of how it's made or whatever, and the color, you might get dulled. But if somebody wants to, and by somebody I mean marketing or branding, wants to put a very crisp looking product shot, you will sometimes get a lithograph, which is just basically a sticker that is printed on white sticker paper, so then they can put it on the flexo and therefore get a nice package. So yeah, so if you're ever in a store and you're looking at boxes of Magic cards, usually that box that a Magic deck is in, when you first buy it, is just cardstock that they have made in a way that fits, like they can fold and make into a package, and it's usually white. So it's very bright. But if you look at a carton for, let's say, I don't know, a blender or maybe these, like, I just gonna say baby products because that's my knowledge. Sometimes you'll get cardboard that has a dull print on it, and then there's one big sticker that is the nice art. That costs money. Packaging is an expensive whole nother thing, and it is expensive. And also in packaging, package construction is also a very interesting area that I would love to learn more about. Like, how do you construct a package? Like, how do you do engineering for making boxes? Anyway, but that's what we're here for. We're not talking about boxes. We're talking about card and printing.
Well, can I, to bring it back to Magic, maybe put one more question forward?
Yep.
And maybe this can be like the thing we centered the end portion of our discussion on. So, again, as a complete outsider to this world and to the construction of Magic, me as a consumer, I look at Magic's product and, like, you have one product, basically. You make these cards, you know? You're not making a car. You're not making something where it's like, well, we got to source steel from over here, and we got to get rubber from this company, and then we got to get the consoles made over here, and then the glass windows are made elsewhere, and then the electronics are made by this company. You're just making printed cards. You have just this one thing. So I guess my question is, why is it bad then? Like, why can't we get that one thing right? And I know there are reasons, but I don't know what they are.
So it is, like you said, it's not like putting a car together, which would have like 80 vendors or whatever. I'm assuming they have maybe 6, 7 vendors at most, 10 really, if you're willing to push it. And it's all about the supply chain, you know, and world events and politics even. You know, you don't think about stuff like that until you are in it and you realize how much the world affects companies in a way that is, why did paper cost go up? You know, well, it's because gas went up or petroleum went up, and it's because so-and-so did some policy in something, or there's political unrest, and that supply chain is in a position where they can't meet our timelines, so we have to go look elsewhere. It's about connections, you know, those business connections, knowing, I mean, even in my level, I am asked sometimes, do you know UX consultants that we could look into hire? Because Amber, you do that kind of stuff. So is there anybody else in your professional hobby field that we could potentially bring in to talk about work? And doing contracting. It could also be an internal thing where someone made a risky decision to try something new because they're trying to cut costs, and they went down a path with a vendor and they were being assured about something, and then boom, it wasn't up to the quality, and now you're in a contract with this people and you have to fulfill that contract. Unless there is a stipulation that says specifically, if you cannot meet, you know, X quality standards, we have right to terminate. There's that. I mean, there's also always just poor business decisions where it's, we need to cut costs and we don't care. And we didn't really fully vet out this process with the vendors, and we just had bad management. That could be also a factor. A lot of the times, though, I feel like when it comes to purchasing and supply chains, it's usually because it's global. It's always around what is going on in that part of the country right then and now, because it does affect, like I said, my company, we do manufacturing, and a lot of it comes from China. And we just know come February, Chinese New Year, we're not going to have anything done. So we build all of our timelines around Chinese New Year. And that could be part of it. So the short answer of how does this happen? Supply chain and world events, which can include anything from natural disaster to political unrest. Taking a business risk, trying out something new, and trying to cut costs that way. And then the third is poor management. We did not plan this out right, and we didn't go through all the checks, the entire checklist, and vet out this process. And the poor management usually comes from not enough resources, people working too many jobs in one job, or just bad leadership. Because usually somebody who's managing the supply chain isn't necessarily a director or a CEO. They're just saying, we need to cut costs, and you need to do not only management of your job, but also we need you to do other things too. And then it's just human. That's my diagnosis.
Yeah. So from my perspective, just hearing this story, the big takeaway I have is it's complicated.
It's very
there are a lot of moving parts.
Well, and that's what always is interesting. Before working in consumer goods, before working in R&D, I would have never have known like how things get made or how many pieces and parts go into making a product. Something as simple as a printed piece of paper that people play with each other, and that's why when you've listened to episodes before, we've talked about it, how sympathetic I am to the R&D team or anybody who has to do development or manage these kinds of things, because it is very complicated and so many things can happen that you would never think would be like political unrest. Why would that affect something? As a 20-year-old going into this field, would have never thought. But here I am now, where my company is experiencing stuff because of the United States stuff, right? Like, we're a regulated company, we make regulated products, and government regulates things. And if the government is having problems and can't respond or answer or do things, then we just sit there and go, okay, all right, I guess we won't get answers on this.
We just have to wait.
And it's a fascinating and crazy, chaotic world.
This does give me sympathy for the people working on these things, and now I have less of a response of like, why can't you do this one thing right? I do think as a consumer, you definitely still have the right to be like, hey, this product is bunk. I don't like it.
Yes, and that is necessary to push companies to do better. I can tell you that companies now, smart companies, are paying attention to what their consumers having to say, because your opinion, your dollars are important to the company.
Clearly, yeah.
And if you don't like it and there are options out there for you, no longer, oh man, I'm getting on my soapbox. At this point in time in our consumer history, we just expect our things to be good, because there really isn't a truly like good excuse, I want to say, where even though the things I said, other than like, yeah, political unrest, natural disaster, you can't control that stuff. But at this point, consumers do expect their product to work well and look good and perform the way that they expect it to perform. So what was my wrap up here? I just had my thought and then I completely lost it.
Well, you started by saying no longer.
Yeah, I wanted to be like, because we're at that point in our consumer history, we expect product to work well, look good, and perform the way we expect it. You have every right as a consumer to be saying, hey, company, I don't like this, and here's why. Can you please fix this? Because I still want to buy your product, but I don't want to buy it if it's this quality constantly. And a smart company is going to go, hey, you buy our stuff. We want you to keep buying our stuff. We are going to listen to you. We're going to make things better. And that's what smart companies should be doing now because, yeah.
And we as consumers, we have like unprecedented platforms to voice how we feel. We can make podcasts about this product that we enjoy, we want to enjoy more, and we can tell the company, hey, here's what's working for us and here's what's not working for us.
Right.
And I will say, to bring it back to Magic, WotC makes interesting decisions from time to time. We've talked about plenty of them. They do tend to react to what their customers say.
That's good. I mean,
yeah,
it's going back to, you know, we just what we expect as consumers is a working product. You know, no, we now are putting our dollars where our loyalties lie, you know, like our brain, like we, you know, some people don't like it. You know, sometimes I'm on the fence about like being walled off by a brand, but when a company is willing to take the time, invest in research, talk to their consumer, figure out what it is that's important to them, and then consistently make quality products that meet or exceed their needs or wants, that is where I'm going to put my money. And the consistency is super key. And because people don't like change, as we have talked about extensively on this podcast. And so, again, going back to a smart company, will be making that their priority because that is how we are operating in this year of 2020s and onward. We are making ethical decisions. We are putting our money where we believe in things, not because, oh, it's a cool new TV necessarily. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And that's another thing too, ethical stuff. Whew.
Maybe that's a separate topic.
That's a separate topic for another time and probably has nothing to do with magic. Maybe it has something to do with magic, but...
I think it might. Well, this was very interesting. Like, this is a whole world that I just don't have any insight into.
And as consumers, I think a lot of times we don't. You know, it's just you buy something, you use it, you get upset with it or you love it, and then it just stops there. And you don't really think too much beyond what you're experiencing by using it.
It exists in a black box. It's just like, here's this thing that was woven like whole cloth, just like it appeared in front of me, and you don't know the story of how it got to you.
I hope that this has been enlightening for not only you, but also for the listeners, because I tend to appreciate product more that I know has a quality and feel about it that I appreciate, because it's just like, oh, they took time and care and effort into thinking this, like not just an unknown person, like they're like, it's a real person. Their job is to make product that delights you and solves problems in your life and brings you fun, right? And as a person who does that for a living, a lot of times we don't get recognized for that, you know, especially in companies where we're just making consumer products to solve problems, not necessarily fun. Like Wizards of the Coast gets to have like their actual designers are front facing, get to talk with people and interact with people, but like actual other product, you know, even the microphone that I'm using right now, somebody put this, and not only did somebody design it, but somebody assembled it for you. Somebody put it in a box for you. Somebody designed that box for you.
Somebody made the manual for it.
Yeah, somebody made the manual, wink, wink, for it. And it's a lot. And I think I wish we were more conscious consumers in that regard. We're talking, we're getting off track of Magic, but I think it all ties back to, it's even how I play Magic is more like a very conscious way of playing Magic, where it's like I only want specific cards for specific reasons to craft specific things. I'm not a person who just buys a tons of booster sets, you know, or buys the new secret lair or whatever just off the bat, because that's just how my mind is.
And you want to bring that same level of consciousness to how we just consume and think about the physical product as well.
Correct.
I think that's a really good takeaway. Amber, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It was great. It was great interviewing
Wait,
you.
who's Amber? I'm Clark.
Clark, thanks for being on the podcast.
You're welcome. Clark.
Where can people find
Clark
you?
can be found in the back dark corner of your closets eating potato chips. Amber can be found online on Twitter at RocketOrca, or go to my website, rocketorca.com, if you want to see like my actual graphic design work and stuff that I do, and other things I do. That's me, Kenny. Thank you for being such a great listener and allowing me to spend 2 hours talking to you about print process. I'm sure you'll cut it down to a bite size, 40 or 50 minute chunk. So
It was a pleasure. I was very interested.
well, Kenny, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Wolfmere. Also, Geekspective is where you can find me and Amber doing all kinds of wacky nonsense and more serious nonsense. Honestly, the reason I exited by saying thanks for being on the podcast, this felt like Tabletop Babble almost.
Yes, it did. Which Tabletop Babble is a podcast Kenny and I co-host with our fellow co-host, Crossways GM, aka John. We talk about TTRPG stuff with people, have them on. A lot of comedians lately.
Yeah, it's, I would say, slightly more serious than this podcast.
Slightly.
This particular episode felt like a Tabletop Babble.
I would like to do more informative talks about this and how it relates to our hobbies, because I think it's fun to bring this knowledge to the general public.
I would also be open to having guests on this show and being slightly more serious. I think that'd be
Ooh,
fun too.
guest. If you want to be a guest on Red Mage, Blue Mage, we'll find you.
We'll find you in the night. All right. Lots to think about. I'm going to go think about it.
Okay, have fun thinking about it. Crunch, crunch,
Okay, bye.
crunch, crunch, crunch. That's me in the corner of your closet, now eating chippies. All right, bye.
Bye.